Chapter 2, Part 2, Three Views of Ethics. The objectives for this video begin with learning the definitions of objectivism, relativism, and subjectivism. We're going to discover the benefits and consequences of each of these views, and then we're going to have the opportunity to consider our own moral beliefs in order to establish which view of ethics we hold. There's three views of ethics that we're going to look at in this video. The first is called Objectivism. Objectivism holds that there is only one universal moral standard. That standard, based on objective moral facts, consists of moral values and principles that hold universally. This means for all people and all societies. Another view is called popular relativism. Under popular relativism, which I'm just going to call relativism from now on, there can be different moral standards for different societies. Each standard, based on that society's moral beliefs and practices, consists of moral values and principles that hold for all members of that particular society. And the third view is subjectivism. Subjectivism holds that there can be different moral standards for different people. Each standard, based on that person's moral beliefs and practices at a given time, consists of the moral values and principles that hold for that person at that time. So a little bit of context about each of these views. None of these three views are talking about principles from the other normative realms that we looked at in the first chapter. So, for example, none of these apply to claims in the realm of law or etiquette, which unquestionably are different in different societies. Each of these three views is talking exclusively about moral principles and values. These three views are also not concerned with the rich diversity in institutions, dress, religious beliefs, and non-normative values that distinguish various cultural traditions. These three views are also completely distinct, which means that each rules out the others. So what this means is that you have to choose one of the three. You can't sometimes be a relativist, sometimes be a subjectivist. You have to just choose one of the three. And finally, these three views are what we call metaethical. This means that none of them take a stand on what's actually right and wrong, but they're views that are about ethics itself. All right, we'll begin with objectivism. So, objectivism holds that there's only one valid moral standard, and this moral standard holds for all human beings. So the kinds of things that we might have in mind here are moral standards like it's always wrong to kill, or it's always wrong to lie, or it's always wrong to cheat. Things like that. Objectivism holds that there's one universal moral standard, regardless of what anyone believes or practices. So, if, for example, the universal moral standard is to not lie, it doesn't matter if in some places it's okay, according to the culture, for people to lie. According to the universal moral standard, it's wrong to lie. Objectivism does not mean that people must all act exactly the same way, no matter what their circumstances are at the time. So, it's possible to develop a more sophisticated account of objectivism where the same moral principles can lead to different obligations in different situations. An example of what I'm talking about here is lying to save a life. So, we may think that not lying and the value of life are both universal moral standards. But notice that even if we believe that objectivism is true, it's possible to put more value on one of those two objective moral standards than the other. So, we might imagine a situation in which a soldier is knocking on our door looking for people that are hiding in our house, and if they find them, they're going to kill them. So, even though it's a universal moral standard not to lie, in this case we could imagine that the universal moral standard of the value of life outweighs the universal moral standard of not lying, and so we can be morally right to not lie in order to save a life. Let's move on to relativism. Moral relativism denies that moral standards are universal. Instead, it maintains that there can be different but equally valid moral standards for different cultures or social groups. Relativism is the view that would follow from the general considerations of the Ring of Jaiji story. Relativism does insist, however, that all who belong to a given group are bound to this group's moral standards, whether they agree with its values and principles or not. This is going to come up again in future videos, and it's an important consequence of relativism. What actually is right and wrong for everyone in that society is what the majority of that society accepts as right. Let's look at subjectivism. Subjectivism maintains that there can be different but equally valid moral standards for different people, even within the same society. So, this is the moral system that is aimed at the individual. So, according to subjectivism, there's no guarantee that the moral standards for any two people will match, nor is there any guarantee that a person's present moral principles will be the same a year from now. Subjectivism makes moral standards entirely dependent on each individual at any given time. Okay, let's review what we should have gotten from this video. Some questions we should ask ourselves and be able to answer is, what are the definitions of objectivism, relativism, and subjectivism? What are the benefits and consequences of each view? Think about your own moral beliefs. Does objectivism, relativism, or subjectivism seem more plausible to you?